we have here the former president of Yonsei University. The first order of our event would be Professor Chung Ga-byung, president of the university's welcoming address.
It is a great honor and pleasure to have Dr. Marilyn Robinson, winner of the 2013 Pak Kyongni Prize, give a special talk at Yonsei University, where in the 128 years old history of outstanding education has made its own heritage and future. I sincerely hope that today's talk will contribute to illuminate such truths and to further fuel the communication between the literature and culture of our two countries. Also, I sincerely hope that all hearts present here may be touched with the gentle grace of literature. I would like to express my warmest congratulations to Dr. Robinson on winning the 2013 Pak Kyongni Prize. May God bless us all with His abundant grace. Thank you very much.
안녕하십니까, 여러분. 박경리 문학상 3회 수상자 메릴린 로빈슨 작가를 이 자리에 모시게 되어 참으로 영광입니다. 우연히도 작년 수상자 러시아 작가 루드밀라 울리츠카야에 이어서 올해도 여성 작가가 박경리 문학상을 수상하게 되었습니다. 지구촌에서 여성의 힘이 점점 더 커지는 것이 확실하게 느껴집니다. 태평양 너머 저편에서 오신 우리 메릴린 로빈슨 작가의 수상을 진심으로 축하드리며 화해와 사랑의 구원을 여성적 섬세함으로 무심한 듯 일상을 서정적 서사로 펼쳐가는 작가의 작품과 계속 조우할 수 있기를 바랍니다.
Thank you very much.
I'm so grateful for the honor I have been given in this prize, that my work has been given, made in tribute to Pak Kyongni. Her example brings honor to fiction and to literature, demonstrating as it does the value they can have for societies and for generations. Her testimony to the experience of the Korean people enlarges and deepens the sense all of us treasure of the beauty and dignity and mystery of human life on earth. I have wondered from time to time why so many people want to write, but then I have wondered from time to time why I want to write. The impulse is there and nothing else will satisfy it. I must try to find the words that would give shape to thoughts that for some reason cannot be resolved until I find the words for them. I must assume that the same impulse lies behind all that writing that goes on all across the continent, which is so invisible to the world at large. Writing can open the way to a close acquaintance with one's own mind, and this is always interesting. It pleases me to think of the tens or hundreds of thousands who make this exploration alone and together. It is also, for the most part, a solitary and isolating experience. To be able to think and talk about it with people who are themselves attempting it is a good way to understand something of the workings of the mind, of language, and of the processes of creation. As I have said, I benefit from these conversations as much as my students do. It is true that I have unusually gifted students, yet I have no doubt that this richer experience of one's own thoughts and resources is a great part of the pleasure that writers at every level take from the effort. We human beings are a mystery to ourselves, and the practice of an art allows us a richer experience of the mystery. To write for the ages is a fine thing, though rare and full of dangers. It can be false and imitative, dull, inflated, self-important. But in fact, these perils threaten us all. One thing I have to tell my students year after year is that readers are patient, even forgiving, if the world of a fiction is strongly enough imagined to engage them. We tell them, fail upward. It is better to accept the risks involved in attempting something difficult than to look for safety in more modest efforts. My teaching is based on my own experience as a writer. I tell my students not to worry if they encounter what is called writer's block. Sometimes it seems impossible to go on with a piece of writing. Words fail, ideas fail. I have found that this usually means a good thing, that I have put a real question to myself, one for which I have no ready answer. Then wait a while, take a walk, read a book. A good long nap can help. In fact, it may take weeks of patience, thinking of other things. Many writers put uncooperative stories away in a drawer and work on others, leaving them unfinished even for years, because forcing the wrong solution would ruin them. The interesting thing is that almost always a solution does come. Since I have lived so much of my life in one place, walking to and from my office across a pedestrian bridge over the Iowa River and along the side of an arboretum, I pass the places where thoughts have come to me, solutions to impasses that I had had no notion how to resolve. It might mean no more than understanding suddenly that a certain word was needed or a particular image. I realize that there is a scene I need to write. Something comes clear to me about a character. I came to Iowa from Massachusetts, an old state with a well-known history. That is where the American Revolution began, after all, and where the Mayflower landed, and where the first Thanksgiving was celebrated. Of Iowa, I knew nothing at all, except that it was an agricultural state in the very large middle of the country, and that it had a good educational system. And I knew about the Writers' Workshop, so when I was invited to come there and teach, I agreed that I would stay for 2 years. A quarter century has passed, during which time the history and landscape of the place have become so important to me that 3 of my 4 novels are set there. And the essays I have written and will write about American history reflect my acquired fascination with the history of Iowa and the Middle West. I'm not sure how coherent a sense I've been able to give you of the current life of American literature as I encounter it and participate in it. My first novel, Housekeeping, was set in the mountains of the Northwest where I grew up. My 3 other novels are all set in a very different terrain, the prairie, a region that is not nearly as flat as people say, but rolling and vast and beautiful in its own way. This is true all over the world, of course. I'm grateful for having seen this culture and terrain. It is so easy to forget the wealth of interest and beauty there is in the world, and to dwell on the constant headlines that tell us only about trouble and contention. To be able to see Korea, where culture and place have lived together from antiquity, is a great pleasure for me. And I am very grateful for the gift of Tree, and I am honored to have received the gift of this very generous prize. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson.
하우스키핑에서요. 루스는 사는 겁니까, 죽는 겁니까?
I like to think, for my purposes, there was a third option.
배경이 먼저인지 캐릭터가 먼저인지 어떤 거를 먼저 그 중점적으로 생각하시고 소설을 쓰시나요?
I write the book in the order in which it is printed. With every one of my books, the first sentence is the first sentence in the printed book. I just start and write from that point. I have to stop and think fairly often. I have a sense of whether I'm doing something that is sound enough to be elaborated, to be built on.
What is it like to be a celebrity as a writer? Do you like it or not?
I want to write a novel about a pastor dying in Iowa in 1956. that he'd have been very likely to say, Marilyn, my friend, think again.
Thank you so much for Gilead, and welcome to Yonsei, which was founded by the first Presbyterian missionary to Korea. So I think it's very fitting that you are here. And I was just kind of wondering, when you're writing Gilead, and it's so convincing how your point of view from a pastor. And I was wondering what kind of experiences you've had have informed that point of view.
Mainly it's going to church and watching. I do write theology, you know.
Could you say something about Calvin?
Oh, yes. His profound humanism is very moving to me. He is absolutely a creature of the Renaissance. I mean, a brilliant example of the Renaissance.
I have a question. You mentioned competition and how you believe that it's undignified, and it's something I actually personally agree with, but then I was kind of curious on why you thought that way. And
the idea that you are given gifts that are your gifts, and that your role in life is to actualize them as fully as possible, as reverently as possible, as usefully as possible. If you are looking over your shoulder at what someone else is trying to do, if you have let somebody outside yourself define the purpose of your life, that is a step away from the dignity that God gave you. I mean, I think that people should work very hard. I think that they should hold themselves to very high standards. But I think the work should be motivated by their sense of their gifts and powers which God gives them. And I think that, it's a loss to the world when people let their aspirations be narrowed down so that they could actually be the aspirations of any of 500 or 5 million people.
My name is Nong. I'm from Wisconsin, from the University of Madison, Wisconsin-Madison. Rival schools with Iowa.
And bigger and better. Not at everything, though.
I'm actually down a road of unsuccessfully becoming a writer. And so I have a question for you. What is your inspiration and purpose of writing, and are there any words of inspiration you have for aspiring writers?
I started writing when I was a child, before I had any conception that there was such a thing as a writer. I read books, but the idea that they had authors was sort of remote to me, The reason that I have written all my life is because I simply have to write. It's an odd thing. My brother, my other self, always had to paint. And when we were little kids, I'd be writing poems and he'd be painting pictures, And we were both sort of compulsive about this. And my only motive to write is that I cannot not write.
So what would you say about an educational system that almost prevents you from doing that precisely?
We have.
Because you yourself have been talking about American education in some of your essays.
Yes.
So.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think I was very fortunate in my education because it was in the mountains in back of beyond, where they didn't, the arrival of the 20th century was not of great interest. And I had a very sort of eccentric but solid education with Latin and penmanship and all this stuff. And I think that there's a terrible tendency, certainly in America now, to try to test and test and test, which is not you know what I mean, test like, are you succeeding or failing in oddly absolute terms, And this means that kind of competition has become much more intense, where everybody is trying to check the same box in the same way. I think it's very destructive. And frankly,
you are actually speaking to most of the students here who have survived that. So.
Well, you know, I believe that, and at the same time, I also believe that your business in the world is to do the best you can with your inevitably unique gifts.
Having like both my parents be immigrants and me growing up in America and then moving to China and then to Korea, I really connected with your discussion of the kind of opaqueness of the American identity and American culture. I was wondering how you thought that indistinctiveness has affected like the progression or evolution of American literature.
We have to, I think, relax our expectations about saying more about American literature than that it should be large and open and done at the highest level of seriousness and skill that our writers are capable of. It's a strange thing. Who knows where it'll end up? I mean, America's a very strange place because it redefines itself and redefines itself and redefines itself. And that's just its destiny. That's what we do.
You know, the past isn't really valued very much at all. I mean, people are so focused on the present and short-term satisfaction that that I think one thing that that certainly in my classes, what I really want to impart to my students is a sense of tradition, you know, a sense of continuity, that there are things, experiences, ideas, insights that they can draw on, you know, from the past to help them, you know, live their lives in the present.
People who really have living traditions are probably less aware of them. And you know, Iowa you know, we're the people that have the presidential caucuses and so on. All of that stuff is so ritualized, it's unbelievable, you know. But nobody would ever stop to say, well, this is a local ritual of this particular group of people. We do it because it has an intrinsic meaning for us, you know. I don't know. I think that we tend to say that people are not traditional, but I think they are. And I think if you step into another culture, you find that they're traditional too, and you recognize it because it's not your way, you know. That's the thing that kind of bothers me about a lot of modern literature. It's like with Baudelaire, we decided what to think about the city, and then afterward we've repeated Baudelaire, you know. Maybe that's not what the city is like. Maybe he was wrong, you know.
Unless you have a pressing question that you need to ask Dr. Robinson, with your permission, I would like to wrap this up. Is it okay? All right. I forgot in my haste to mention the organizers. Thank you. A round of applause for. Thank you.